Welcome back to Metropole Television. My name is Simba Elijah Charles Kiage. This is your economic review this morning. All right, now let's talk about the new iPhone. Now, the latest range of iPhones. Wow. Let me take that again. Now, the latest range of iPhones, yes, has been described as fast as Apple CEO Tim Cook on Tuesday unveiled the lineup, which included iPhone 12, iPhone 12 mini, iPhone 12 Pro, and iPhone 12 Pro Max at the company's headquarters in California at a virtual event. Now, the very first time ever an Apple device will run under the latest 5G technology capable of tremendous speeds. Apple wrote on their blog that the phones will be, now it's a direct quote, featuring the most 5G bands on any smartphone. iPhone 12 models offer the broadest 5G coverage worldwide. Two models in the US support millimeter wave, the higher frequency version of 5G, allowing iPhone 12 to reach speeds of up to 4 gigabytes per second, even in densely populated areas. And quote, good. To help us this morning understand why the buzz around the new iPhone, we are joined by Emmanuel Chenze. He is a tech commentator. Emmanuel, how are you doing, sir?
I'm very well this morning. Thank you.
Happy to have you around at Metropole Television. Yes, let's start with that. Why? Why is there a buzz about the new iPhone 12? What is different?
Well, as you might know, this has been a rather slow year for most businesses, but also this is Apple, so they make a buzz out of their product launches every year, and the iPhone only comes once in a year. And going by history, Apple is a trendsetter. So what they are doing with the iPhone 12 tends to be what you're going to do to see in the next year from coming from other device makers. And also this is big for them because for the first time for Apple users of Apple devices, they're getting 5G. And of course, the incremental updates that they get year over year, better cameras, faster, speedy performance, those kinds of things. And of course, from the design we've seen, they've gone back to a design language that we saw a few years back. So it's big for them. And as the world comes out of what has been slow, a global pandemic, this is what we are going to see define most of 2021.
Yes. Emmanuel, just before we continue this morning, I want us to look at some data on Apple revenue from the iPhone sales. And I want us to look at it right now, which if you can actually provide us that data so we can look at that. Yes, iPhone sales revenue, if you can actually look at that all the way from 2015 to where we are right now, I think you could sort of say the iPhone sales revenue has been dipping over time. And I would like to ask you, why do you think that is so? Now, let's look at iPhone annual revenue as well, even as we look at the sales revenue as well. Emmanuel, what would you say is the reason as to why the sales of iPhones have been dipping as well?
Well, if you are to look at them in isolation, they've been dipping. But if you are to look at them as per industry trends and a percentage of those industry trends,
Yes.
they're actually healthy. So because it's been generally a trend, and Apple maintains its share of the niche market that it occupies. Of course, the iPhone is a mainstream device in more advanced markets and tends to be what is like a luxury item in markets like ours, where people don't spend as much as the iPhone prices go. But
Yes.
then it is addressing that with the iPhone 12 release. We got what Apple is calling an iPhone 12 mini. It's a 5.4-inch iPhone. It's the smallest of this generation. Of course, they've had more smaller iPhones previously, but it's the smallest of this generation, and it's also the cheapest. And they are looking to use it as an entry point for more people to get into Apple's ecosystem. So that is the steps it's taking to address that. It's offering more variety, unlike in a long time ago when they were offering just one standard iPhone. Now they are offering more. We have the and now we have the mini. So they're trying to squeeze in something for everyone and accommodating even more people as a way of growing that market share. And as far as shipments go, they are one of the few companies that won't be that hit in 2020 despite the pandemic and all. So don't look at the numbers in isolation.
Pretty much. Emmanuel, because we're still on that point, well, are they late to the 5G party? Because it's not the first time that we're getting a 5G phone. I mean, we've been having 5G phones as early as the year started. Even late last year, we had 5G handsets in the market.
Yes, they are not, to answer you straightly, they are not late. But also, this is classic Apple. Apple doesn't latch on to new technology and introduce it to its hundreds of millions of customers every year. It usually waits out a bit, at least that has been the trend for the market to set itself, and then come in and just optimize things and ease its customers into what is latest. And actually, this is one of the fastest adoptions we've seen from them. Many commentators were waiting on them to pass on 5G this year and maybe join next year. Why that is important in markets like the US, they've already started the 5G wave with the millimeter wave rollout, but it's still not as widespread elsewhere. If you are to start here in Kenya, for instance, you still have the likes of Safaricom trialing 5G, and that is the case in most of Africa. And then you have parts of Asia and most of Europe already live with their 5G stuff. So they are not late to the party because 5G networks are just rolling out. We still have 4G being very predominant, and the new iPhones support that, and they come with their 5G ready. And what Apple is saying is they are ready to go anywhere in the world because they tested this in multiple countries with multiple network operators. So they are not exactly late to the party. They're actually coming in at a time when there's enough bandwidth to accommodate them, probably the right time.
Yes. Yeah, Emmanuel, I know you've said, well, don't look at just individual numbers in terms of the sales. You also have to look at what the general tech space is really in terms of sales of new smartphones. But talk to me about, so they're selling it as a new device entirely. But Emmanuel, it's not new essentially. Look at the design. It's like an iPhone 5, good, which is bigger with a different camera. Do you think that by itself is going to make people look at it and say, maybe because 5G is not widespread across the country, across the world, it's maybe time to hold on to my device as I wait for 5G to become more relevant. Is that going to be another area that they're going to receive a hit in terms of sales?
I don't think so. Apple is usually strong in converting existing users of its devices to carry over into the
Yes, but
newer.
Emmanuel, that happened first time with iPhone 5C. That's the time that we saw them go back. Are they plateauing in terms of design? Because we've seen the likes of Samsung, the likes of Huawei. Every device sort of looks new on what they sell as their flagship device.
Yes, Apple has plateaued in terms of design for a while now. In fact, their only product that has received a massive refresh in terms of design and looks different is a product targeted at people working like at your studio, very high-end professionals, the Mac Pro. The rest of its product line is pretty much stale. I'm using a MacBook to communicate with you. That design hasn't changed in years. Now that's the same thing we are seeing with the latest iPhone. Still has the cutout at the top for Apple ID. It's a facial recognition system that hasn't changed. The rest of the design, as you have said correctly, draws lots of inspiration from designs we saw a few years back with the iPhone, starting with the iPhone 4, being refined in the 4S, and finally reaching peak with the iPhone 5. So you can see from that they haven't done a lot of any changing, and maybe it's tactical, maybe they're planning a big reveal in the future. I don't know how tactical, because people like familiarity, so they're keeping things where they are. If it isn't broken, they're not fixing it. But yeah, it is what it is. It's a stale design. They haven't done much to do to rework the design. They are not disturbing the piece, and
Yes.
maybe that's why they need to carry them over during these times.
Pretty much. But we talked about iPhone 12 mini, iPhone 12 Pro, and iPhone 12 Pro Max. Would you say that that is exactly what they're using as a competition into the Android world? Because we do know that in Android you get more for a lesser value, but that's not necessarily the same thing that you get with Apple.
I think they are just with, say, the mini, they are offering those people who always wanted to get into the Apple ecosystem, even
Yes.
more reason to get into it because they've tried. This is not the first time they're trying this. We've had the second generation iPhone SE, and they are keeping the iPhone 11 from last year in the lineup to entice people further. Because if you're still looking at getting a very budget smartphone and budget by Kenyan standards, you won't be looking at Apple anytime soon. Whatever they are considering very cheap starts northwards of 70,000 shillings. Still very expensive by Kenyan standard, where the average phone costs 10,000 shillings or below.
Pretty much. Emmanuel, thank you very much for joining us this morning on Metropole Television to just paint a picture of what Apple is targeting with the new iPhone 12.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to another issue this morning. Now, Johnson & Johnson halted clinical trials of its COVID-19 vaccine after a participant fell ill, according to a report by Bloomberg. Now, AstraZeneca ran into a similar problem last month before restarting in most countries except for the US, while the late-stage trial holds are not unusual. Pressure to find a vaccine means they will gain much more attention. Now, hopes of a vaccine by election day have been all but dashed as Food and Drug Administration safety measures extend the timeline for approval. Now, here locally, we are coming from increased infections as well, and exactly the hope for a vaccine that is going to see things in the world economy turn around. We've also had announcement from Russia as well on their chances for a vaccine, which, as we do know, the US was quick to denounce, helping us to understand the modalities and the complexities of coming up with a new vaccine. This morning, we are joined by Dr. Victor Ngani. He's a medical director, RFH Healthcare. Dr. Ngani, happy to have you around.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and I want to ask you, as this to be the first question, do you think that we are so much in a hurry to find a vaccine for COVID-19?
The answer to that is a direct yes. I think the whole world right now is grappling with this pandemic, and the measures that are being taken across the world are not friendly and are themselves causing havoc either in the economy or in society or in even the education of the young ones. And so getting a vaccine is a priority for the world right now. And as a result, it's been rushed to some degree. There are operations across the world. For example, Operation Warp in the US that's trying to ensure that there are over 300 million vaccines by January of 2021.
All right. What is the latest announcement by Johnson & Johnson, who are, I would say, touted as the leaders in trying to give us a vaccine? What does it mean now to anybody really trying to get a vaccine before 2021?
Okay, so the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was in phase 3 trials, but they're not the only one. There are, I think, about 11 or so companies already at the phase 3 trials. If I just explain what that is, in developing a vaccine, there's the initial exploration phase, then it will proceed to what is called preclinical phase, where they're assessing in the laboratory and perhaps on other animals. Then we come to the clinical phase. Now, in clinical phase is where you're testing it in humans. In the first phase, you're looking at a small population of people where you give them the vaccine and assess for a couple of reactions. Then the second phase, you have a slightly bigger population, but a population similar to the group that you are hoping to prevent the disease in. And then phase 3 trials, actually, you have thousands of people being tested. You're looking at how effective it is. You're looking at how the side effects are. And so Johnson & Johnson is one of those companies that had gotten to the phase 3 trials. And phase 3 is just the last stage before normally you have approvals from organizations like the FDA. And a person fell ill. This is not highly unusual. The illness can be as a result of the vaccine, but it's also possible that it's as a result of something else not related. And it's a question of them stopping the trials, assessing the data that they have, and making a decision. However, this does not affect other vaccines that are in development.
Yes.
And right now, there are more than 200 in development, and almost 200 in development, and at least 11 are in phase 3 trials.
Yes. So how long does it take, if in case that you're assessing a patient who's gotten ill in the process of you testing this drug, how long does it take for you to resume? Because that's also going to be another talking point for any other person in the business of really trying to come up with a vaccine during this period.
Well, so it depends on the kind of reaction that has been observed. And also it depends on how many people in the group are affected. It's not uncommon in developments of vaccine or drugs to have that phased out altogether and a new direction taken, but it's also not uncommon for confirmation. So the timelines will differ significantly. I don't think we know yet what the illness was. The Johnson's team will be able to advise in due course, but when there's a safety concern, it does take some time for us to get clarity.
Yes.
Of course, it may mean that this vaccine will not have this particular one. They may take a different direction. That's also a possibility. Worst case scenario.
I want to take you back to exactly what the conversations were as a COVID-19 vaccine was actually touted at the earlier this year. Well, experts were saying, well, it might take more than a year for us to be comfortable to give you a COVID-19 vaccine. But that conversation has changed, Dr. Ngani. We do have Russia announcing that, well, we do have a vaccine that we really want to roll out in mass production. US President Donald Trump is saying, well, a vaccine has to be found soon. We've actually seen him even get into a tug of war with his bigger health experts in the economy. What does it mean? What does it take to have a vaccine at a shorter period?
Routinely, a vaccine takes between 2 and 5 years. This is the general path for, depending on the disease again, to develop a vaccine. And some can take up to 10 years.
Yes.
And in fact, the process is where you go through the whole 10 years and the vaccine never makes it to production because of safety concerns, such as, something that can arise. But then, unfortunately, for COVID-19, it's not just the fact that it's a major issue right now across the world, but also it has geopolitical undertones.
Yes.
So you'll see Russia making a vaccine, calling it Sputnik 5, which is more or less relating it to the first time, the first station to space. The issue of vaccines in the US has become presidential election issue. And so there are political factors that have come into play in this particular one. But if you were to speak strictly within the science of it, then essentially what we'd be seeing is a fast tracking of the vaccine, which is necessary because of the impact and what is being seen. And essentially what you're trying to do is this. We are hoping to get between 60 and 70% of the population, world's population, to be immune. In this way, we achieve what is called herd immunity.
Yes.
And the example that I would give is in a room of 100 people, there are a few COVID particles, but 70 of the people in that room have immunity, either because they got COVID before and recovered, or because they got a vaccine. In this case, the few particles are likely to land on people who already have it, and therefore there'll be no spread. And that's how you overcome COVID. That's the general plan. And so getting to that level of immunity quickly is a priority for the world, either through vaccination or having COVID affect many people. And for us to be safe, vaccines are definitely the way to go.
Pretty much. So, Dr. Ngani, paint for us a picture as well. I mean, even saying that normally it even takes up to 5 years for you to be quite confident that you have a vaccine that will stand the test of time and can be rolled out to the masses. Are we going to say that even during this time, when the world is talking about rolling out this vaccine, that we have to be in a period again of constantly collecting data on how the masses are reacting to this vaccine?
Absolutely. In fact, I've spoken about phase 1 to 3, but in fact, all vaccines have a phase 4,
yes.
Where after it's been rolled out and approved, continuous data is collected and there are revisions. And that has happened even in some vaccines.
Yes.
Remember, at this time, Russia is manufacturing its vaccine at phase 3 trials before concluding phase 3 trials. And so you can see there's much more of a rush. I think there's greater funding, which also helps reduce the time. So realistically, the COVID vaccine will be made faster and earlier than any other vaccine that we've had in development before, but also the other factors that make it be rushed, so to say. Of course, rushing it comes with its own risks. So you may rush it and find out that, for example, yes, initially in the first year, it seems to be very, very effective with limited side effects. But then 3 years down the line, you have significant side effects. We will not know until that time has lapsed. And that's the nature of development. It's a risk you have to embrace, unfortunately, because the alternative is to have COVID ravaged societies as it has ravaged them as we speak.
Yes, and Dr. Ngani, I want to talk to you about this as well. There have been conversations about sort of assuming that these curfews and social distancing would sort of take us into a place where we're saying, if we can't get a vaccine right now, then at least herd immunity would come in and help. Do you think that that's what most economies are looking at right now, especially when this talk about a vaccine is also now being viewed as quite short, or is going to actually now bring more challenges, especially when you have to collect so much data from larger populations as opposed to a few that you're observing?
Indeed, the measures being undertaken by most countries, whether it's a lockdown or it's a curfew or it's social distancing, what we are trying to do is to limit the spread of COVID-19 until such a time
Yes.
that we are able to protect the majority of the population. And I think what we're holding out for, when you talk about flattening the curve, you're saying let the spread of the disease be so slow that when those who become critical, they do not overwhelm the resources that you have in terms of critical care services, in terms of care, in terms of hospital facilities. But then also we are holding out to avoid spreading this to high-risk groups until such a point that they've got a vaccine that will keep them safe in the event they caught COVID, and if actually to stop them from getting COVID. And even if they were to get COVID, then they would have milder symptoms, not as severe as what has been seen. That's the general principle of it.
Dr. Ngani, I'm going to ask you this so that we make this as clear as possible. Which is a bigger risk? Is it coming up with a vaccine and then rolling out to masses even before we actually so sure about the performance of these vaccines, and then you have to collect mass data from mass populations, or wait, be so sure, give out a vaccine that is going to be quite relevant to these masses? Which is the lesser evil in this? Because now I think we have to talk about that.
Yeah, I think I'll give you a political answer, but
Yes.
also it's an answer in the truth. I think if we are to wait for perfection right now, the cost will be too high. And that
Yes.
cost is not just in terms of lives, it's also, well, actually it's in terms of lives, but not just lives as a result of COVID-19, but also as a result of the job losses, as a result of the broken society. You know, a lot of situations are going on right now that, the people who lose their lives, when you get a perfect vaccine, it will not help them. And the longer we wait, then we get natural herd immunity. So yes, there's a balance. Let us sort of make an educated scientific guess backed by significant data that at phase 3 trials, you get sufficient confidence that the vaccine, one, is effective, and number two, that the vaccine is relatively safe. Then we can begin to roll that out. I think what we'll then have is full disclosure. So a person makes an informed decision where we say, this is where we are with this vaccine,
Yes.
this is what the risks are, and these are the options. Would you prefer to take this or take a different vaccine? That balance is what we have to find right. Right now, we can't wait for perfection, and also we can't roll it out too early before we have some confidence around the vaccine being given.
Yes, finally, therefore, Dr. Ngani, as we clear this conversation, I mean, what do the other third world countries, especially like Kenya now, read into this? Because our chances of getting our own vaccine, they're quite limited. We have to depend on the other developed countries who actually give us that vaccine. If you're watching this and then saying, well, we have to wait, we have to roll it also in the country, what do you think we stand in this conversation for? Is it too early? Is it too late for us to roll out a vaccine?
Well, I think the first thing we should read into this is just learn a lesson. Let our ears, let us wake up to a large extent. You know, institutions like KEMRI, Kenya Medical Research Institute, has been doing research in collaboration with other centers for the longest time.
Yes.
And KEMRI is actually quite adept at this. And there are studies they've done that have contributed to development of world vaccines across the world. Now let us be the ones to make those initiatives internally and fund those processes. So what's happening is that organizations like KEMRI don't have funding from within, they depend on funding from outside to do the vaccines, which are then owned by other people. Well, we could just change that, because you see, in these big organizations, the universities in the West, it's African and third world scientists who are involved in this process in key areas. And the actual studies are being done by organizations like KEMRI, you know, across Africa, and other groups as well. And so for us to understand that we are as capable as any other person to develop our capacity for research and therefore contributing to solutions in the world rather than waiting. Because as it stands now, if the vaccines are to be developed whether in the US or in Russia or in Europe, you can trust me that their communities will get the vaccines first before we get our vaccines. And yes. So if anything we can learn from this is that we cannot force ourselves to be priorities, number one. Their priority are their own citizens, but then how much do we care about our own citizenry? And in such an instance, the onus is on us to step up and take our position as solution providers, as opposed to people who are waiting for solutions to be handed down to us.
Dr. Victor Ngani, thank you very much for taking your time off your busy schedule to speak to Metropole TV.
Asante sana.
All right, we take a short break. Once we come back, let's speak about Rubis Energy. What are they targeting in the country? Because they're already there. Let's speak to the GMD.